It's still nighttime. It's fine. I will film during the day. I have a friend with me today. So, we love that. We love that. Just... it's fine. Hi guys! Welcome back to my channel, and if this is your first video, welcome to the channel. If you watched my last video, thank you so much for watching that and giving it so much support and liking it and subscribing from it. Literally anything that's awesome. Thank you so much. But this video, today's video, is based on the other paper I wrote, which is on robot theater. So it's another really interesting topic that I looked at and that I think is really, really cool, and I hope you guys will too. I mean, are you curious if actors are gonna be replaced by robots, or if they're already being replaced by robots? Are you interested in what even is robot theater? If you've never even considered or thought that robots could be in theater, are you curious as to what that looks like? Well, you're watching the right video, so let's get started. AI and computers and machinery is all becoming more and more integrated with who we are, with how we live. But there's still this kind of sense of distance, or at least like a lack of fully integrating or fully connecting with these sort of computers and this AI in a human way. But in putting robots into the artistic, theatrical landscape, which is something we've always thought of as like distinctly human, suddenly we have a new lens of looking at these robots and finding a way to connect, or finding a link from what we know to something that, you know, we can start to understand them more. Oh, okay, but. Before we dive into what robot theater can do in terms of helping us better understand our own human world, but also a human-robot integrated world, first, it's good to find a way to look at robot theater in terms of the way that we should perceive it, or the way that we should like have our mind ready to approach it. And I think the best way to do this is to look at robot theater as another kind of theater that we've had for generations, and that is puppet theater. I mean, the similarity between puppet theater and robot theater can't be denied. And in researching puppet theater to then look at how to look at robot theater, I found a great paper called Puppet Theater. Yes, in looking at puppet theater, I found a paper called Puppet Theater. Shocking, absolutely mind-blowing. It's a paper by Otakar Zich. I also hope I'm pronouncing that somewhat correctly, and if I'm not, I apologize, but I will put his name so that, you know, you have the ability to read it. So in this paper, Zich introduces two distinct modes of perception for puppet theater. Modes of perception as in like how to view puppet theater. So the first mode of perception that he posits is that we cannot take equally seriously their speech and movements, in brief, their manifestations of life. We thus find them comical or grotesque. So in this mode of perception, you're pretty much just looking at it for what it is. A fake puppet. And that doesn't really get you anywhere. I mean, what are you learning from that? Besides the fact that you're just continually looking at it as something that's just not real, and that's it. That's not fun. That's not interesting. Stop. No. The second mode of perception is puppets can be taken for live beings, in that we put emphasis on their apparent manifestations of life, their movements and speech, and take these with shows of, or with, sincerity. So this way of looking at puppet theater is to buy into that sort of fictional reality. What this is saying is, well, yes, it's not an actor, it's not a human, but don't look at that. That's not important, or at least it's not gonna help you in finding some deeper connections, finding some meanings, finding something from it. In saying, you know, don't look at it as just a robot, I also have to remember that I thought about that too initially. I did think like, no, robots should not be in theater, go away. But obviously I learned nothing, you know, thinking that way. You gotta buy into it. You gotta see what it's got to say. You gotta see what you can learn from it, what comes out of it. There's so much. And exactly what that is, I'm gonna be telling you right now. So one of the first things that robot theater is able to show us and find a sort of connection between our human world and their robotic world is through movement. It's not a risk that robots are gonna take over and suddenly be, you know, dancing at the New York Ballet, but that there is room for robots to dance ballet nonetheless. There's another great quote from a paper. The paper's called Robot Choreography, the Paradox of Robot Motion. And the quote is, "The intention of this new medium," meaning robot theater, "is not to replace human choreography and human dance, but rather to provide an alternative vehicle for artistic expression." So it's not a case of being replaced, but as an alternative way of looking at something that is sort of distinctly human, that is human choreography and dance. And if we're striving to become a more integrated society with our technology, with AI, then we need to find those connections. We need to find ways of looking at them through a lens that we understand. And so movement is one of those first lenses that we're able to look through to make a connection between their world and our world. Another little great quote to add in to make you think. "Habitualization casts a desensitizing pall." Is it pall? Pale? No. Pal? Over the world, depriving us of actual experience. So breaking habits, looking at things through new lenses, super crucial. Super crucial. Oh, hang on, okay. Another, this quote, "A robot is a machine, but the motion of such a machine does not necessarily have to be merely mechanical. It can at times be artistic." So there you go. One performance in particular that I'm going to be talking about to demonstrate this amazing aspect of robots in choreography is Shanghai Science and Technology Museum's piece called Ji Shi Ren Robot Theater. I hope I'm also pronouncing that correctly. It's a common theme for this video, me just absolutely butchering the shit out of words, but that's fine. And let me just play a clip and let's talk about it afterwards. So, if you couldn't recognize it, those are the mechanical arms that are used in factories to build things like cars. So those are those big industrial robotic arms. But look at how beautiful this choreography was. I mean, we might see these robotic arms in a factory and think of them as something very rigid and something cold and masculine and stiff and whatnot, but then we put them through this lens of choreography and suddenly they're fluid and elegant and artistic and feminine and beautiful. And it's this very strange sort of contradiction of these two worlds. Once you see those robotic arms doing this beautiful performance, it starts to make you think, well, what have I been constantly thinking is just for like in one little box that could never be something else? Like it kind of blows that all up. So another way that we're able to connect and really sort of understand these kind of unfamiliar or unhuman robots is through thought and conversation. And there's one playwright in particular called Annie Dorsen. I love her. But she made a piece called Hello, Hi There. And in this piece, it specifically looks at how computer and technology can demonstrate this other way of looking at thought and conversation, especially in comparison to our human way of understanding and perceiving thought and conversation. Because, I mean, undoubtedly one of the biggest roadblocks to understanding and fully integrating with AI is the way that they sort of try and be human in terms of the way they think and the way that they talk. There's usually two distinct issues. It's either one, that they're too uncannily similar to the way that humans are. I mean, something like those websites that are sort of chatbots, right? And I know, at least when I was growing up, like when I was 13, 14, like there was one specific chatbot site, I forgot what it's called, I think it was like a name. And you would go on there and people would like talk as like, is it a person? Like, are we actually talking to a person or is it really a computer? Because sometimes it would like spew on this conversation with you and you would go back and forward and it would feel like you were literally talking to a real person and it would trip you out. You'd be like, wait, this can't just be a computer, right? Or something like the app Replica. It's a relatively new app, I think. Basically, you kind of create your own sort of chatbot in a way, but it's got a face, it's got a body, it's got a gender, and it becomes your kind of friend. I think if you pay for the app, it can be also like a boyfriend or a girlfriend or whatever, which, I mean, it talks to you back and forward and sometimes it's like creepily accurate or creepily real to life and it makes you sort of unsettled because it feels real but it's not a real human, but it feels so human-like. And so that's kind of one of the issues, is that it's too similar to how a human is, and then it creeps us out. It's the idea of sort of the uncanny valley. And if you haven't heard about the uncanny valley, I'll kind of put a little box down here, sort of briefly outlining the principles of what it is. And the second issue with AI is usually that it's too dissimilar, and it's like too strange and stupid and completely unlike human thought and conversation, and then we just find it annoying and dumb. Like, why can't you understand what I'm trying to say? So there's usually those two very distinct issues. But with the piece Hello, Hi There, it shows you the kind of meeting between those two issues, where you have the uncannily similar and then the just absurdly dissimilar and strangeness of AI. So basically for this performance, Annie Dorsen created an algorithm for these two computers. So the stage is pretty much set up with two computers on the stage and they're talking to each other. And so she programmed this algorithm herself. She fed in a bunch of different source material through this algorithm. She fed through Shakespeare plays and Greek tragedies, and also this debate that was aired on TV in the 70s between Chomsky and Foucault. Oh my God. Excuse me one second.
Michel Foucault, French.
Foucault. Chomsky and Foucault. Okay, cool. So yeah, and in this production, she also puts a TV that's showing the live feed of the recorded debate between Chomsky and Foucault. And if you haven't seen the debate or heard about the debate, it's basically the two of them talking about human language and creativity and consciousness, I believe. So that in itself is just super interesting that she sort of used that as her basis, but genius, obviously, that there's these two computers on stage and they're pretty much sort of debating or talking to themselves about all these topics. She's fed in different plays, so there's the creativity, there's Shakespeare, there's Greek tragedy, so there's obviously the human language aspect, and then obviously she's put in the actual debate between Chomsky and Foucault while you're watching on stage the actual two humans, Chomsky and Foucault, debating those topics as well. So you got the computers doing what the humans are also doing. And it's super fascinating. And according to Dorsen, she said that there's actually over 8 million outcomes for how the algorithm would have played out for the performance. So every single performance was a different performance entirely. The algorithm fed out different things. The conversation between the chatbots sort of happened differently. It was all up to chance. And in watching the clip, you can see that they sort of flow and bounce off each other like real human conversation at times. So in an interview, Dorsen mentions, although chatbots are programmed and draw their conversational material from databases, their individual performances are responsive to the actions of other performers, autonomous, unpredictable, and improvisational. That is, they perform in the moment. In other words, they do work tantalizingly similar to that of a human performer, troubling ontological distinctions. And I think that that's what's so genius about this performance, is that there is this sort of strangely human-like aspect to the way that the chatbots are communicating to each other, but then you see the real-life representation of that with two real humans also doing the exact same thing. And I think that that comparison in real time is what's so genius. And in seeing that, obviously, that's where we make our connection, because We can see the human struggle with trying to debate someone, with trying to grapple these huge concepts, and then two robots doing the exact same thing. And how is it different? How are they similar? What are they doing that's different to the way the humans are doing it? And then what are the things that the humans are doing that the chatbots aren't doing? Dorsen also says, I like the problems because sometimes the problems feel more human than the so-called successful thoughts. Humans also get into loops or make crazy non sequiturs or get lost in banalities. And it's true, these things are superhuman. I mean, not all of us are that eloquent with words. I know I definitely am not the smoothest of sort of conversationalists. Like I do tend to like trip over my words and like just, like even right now, see? Oh my God, I haven't seen this point exactly. I haven't seen this production in person, but I know that if I were to see it, I just feel like there'd be so much that I could connect with. There'd be so much that I'd be like, oh my God, like how many times have I done that? But then it's chatbots that are doing it. And so I'm like, oh wait, they're like me. Or I'm like them, or we're like each other. There's a connection. We're gonna have a happy future. So to have a little recap, so we've got movement as a point of connection with robots, as is shown through robot theater, and we have thought and conversation as a point of connection. So what about, let me get close because this is interesting. What about the most human thing of all, or at least what we think is the most human thing of all? Emotions, right? So can we find a way to connect with robots through emotions in robot theater? Well, there is one particular production that definitely opens the doors for that kind of discovery, and that is the performance entitled Sayonara. This was the Synoden. It's throughout this whole video, you guys, I'm so sorry. It is a 20-minute performance where a female humanoid robot acts as a caretaker to a sick and dying human and provides her comfort through conversation and poetry. And as you can see, straight off the bat, it's really hard to tell which one is the human and which one is the humanoid robot, right? And that is entirely kind of the point of the production. Humanoid robots can induce familiar feelings in humans because of their human-like appearance. And yeah, this is exactly the point of the production, because what we're focusing on is the conversation that's happening, what's actually going on between these two characters on stage, what they're saying, the emotion to what is happening, all of the messages, all of the underlying stuff. It's not just simply going robot, not robot, ta-da! And the most beautiful part of this production is that the robot on stage is essentially trying to explain and trying to understand human emotion. That's essentially that character's sort of struggle. And then you've got the human character that's kind of going through something that's innately a fear for humans, or at least something that we all have to grapple with, is sort of death and sickness and disease and all of those kind of heavy topics. But then on the other side, the robot has just as many, let's just say, issues to also grapple with, like heavy issues to grapple with, in that they can't understand emotion, but they want to understand emotion. They want to find a way to connect, but they can't. And so that's what that character is struggling with, and that's what the human character is struggling with. And that's pretty much what the performance is that struggle between the two of them. Two struggles that are both just as important to that particular character's reality in terms of who they are, but at the same time, when brought sort of together, in a way kind of complements each other. I mean, we tend to think of our technology and our computers in everyday life as something that, you know, obviously doesn't have emotions, right? They don't feel happy, they don't feel sad, or at least they don't show it if they do. Are you happy? But in watching Sayonara, you can kind of look at it in a bit of a different way. I mean, obviously, this isn't gonna instantly, you know, relate to our laptop or our phone, but maybe eventually it might. Another thing it does is provide new insight for engineers designing robot behavior. Moreover, presenting such a robot at public performances in theaters enables a large-scale evaluation of audience impressions towards acting robots, which can then be fed back into the design process. And I believe that this production also did something like that. It had sort of a survey or a little questionnaire that they would give audience members at the beginning of the production, and then I think at the end of the production too. They took this production to, I think, a few different countries, Japan, America, some other countries in Europe. I am not 100% sure, but they were able to at least take it to a bunch of different countries with different audiences, and then accumulate all the data that they got from all of the audience members' questionnaires and then sort of understand maybe the way that different countries and different people from different countries perceive robots and think about them and all these different things, which is really, really interesting because then they were able to use that data, or at least to, if they wanted to, or if it was requested to, give to robot engineers and people that would need that kind of data when looking at making robots for different countries or for different regions. I think it was the Japanese audiences were the most, I guess, welcoming or sort of fine with the fact that it was a robot. And I think that that's just really interesting because countries like Japan and Korea too, I mean, I haven't been to Japan as much as I've been to Korea, but I know like even at the Korean airport, like there's like this little robot guy that like goes around in the international terminal, and if you need any help, you can like go up to it and ask for directions or ask for sort of help. Like nowhere else have I ever seen that, and I'm sure Japan has similar things too. So it's interesting that that country, seeing that production, that their audience were sort of the most welcoming to it. I guess it just kind of it does more than just the performance. It's able to provide more knowledge and understanding, and I think that's another great thing. Not only does it create a connection to us as the audience members watching, and the way that we can connect to robots and AI and things now and in the future, and find a new lens and a new way of looking at them to get that connection with them. But it also helps the people who are actually working on that technology and building that kind of future for robotics, and how they're able to use robot theater as kind of a real-time representation, a real-time testing model for the things that they need to work on and improve and learn from and whatnot. And another performance that does more of this specifically, the more of the kind of learning and understanding robot and humans working together and how that looks like, is LAAS's performance of Roboscopy. So this performance, rather than the kind of beauty aspect or the kind of artistic aspect that we were looking at with the pieces I just mentioned before, what Roboscopy does is not look necessarily at the kind of artistic aspect, but more on the human-robot interaction sort of aspect. So Roboscopy uses a PR2 robot running software developed at LAAS, as well as a human actor interacting on stage. So essentially the performance shows the robot and the human trying to interact and communicate with their two varying sort of ways of communication and ways of performing tasks. And obviously one of the biggest challenges for robot engineers is trying to find more ways to seamlessly integrate robots to work alongside humans. And so performances like this, as I mentioned just before, help to do that and help the audience, help us to find that connection, but also help robot engineers to improve their own technology that they're making. I think especially because this rings true to our human life too. I mean, we come into contact with issues like this a lot in life. I mean, you might meet someone who speaks a completely different native tongue to you, and so you have this difficulty in communication, or maybe even people with sort of mental handicaps or mental disabilities, and we might struggle to find this common connection or a way to kind of connect with different people. But this struggle often lies with a lack of exposure with these kind of situations. With more exposure, the more we become used to this and the more we understand. And I think that this is exactly the same with robot theater and with robots in general. It's this kind of lack of exposure and lack of understanding these different situations. And with more understanding comes a better chance of harmonious, peaceful integration. So to recap again, watching these performances gives us a chance to look at beauty, something that's very human, something that's very true to who we are, artistic, and looking at it through a new lens, which is a foreign, strange being that's in our world right now, but that's still very new, still not fully understood. And in watching them in theatrical productions and watching them on stage, we can see the beauty that they have with movement, with thought and conversation, and with emotions. But also overall, with a lot of the productions, they're able to show a human and robot sort of integrated reality, show us where robots excel, where they don't excel, and conversely where humans sort of have the leg up, so to speak, but then also where sort of robots have us sort of one up on different things. It's giving us a new way to understand these beings, these new technologies, and in doing so, we form this sort of connection, we find a common ground, so to speak, maybe a common concern is that they're going to be replacing humans, or that we should be fearing for our jobs as artists, that robots are going to be taking over those jobs too, but that isn't necessarily a fear. Art obviously is infinite. There is never going to be enough, or never going to be a run out of room for new art. So that shouldn't be a fear. I'm sure you don't necessarily go straight to looking at the beauty of Siri or Alexa or a Roomba, but in watching robot theater and in seeing robot theater, reading about it and understanding it a bit better, you could slowly start to kind of see the beauty in those things. And as these technologies become more and more integrated into our realities, into our lives, and become more and more advanced and more and more present, you know, until the day when Siri or Alexa become teachers in classrooms or cashiers or therapists even, you know, until that day happens, we're at least seeing different ways that we can look at these different technologies in a different light. And so if and when that day does come, when that happens, we might be able to go into that reality with a slightly different way of looking at it, because we've been exposed to looking at these technologies in this different light, in this more human, artistic light, and that connection's been formed, that understanding has been sort of established, and it's not so foreign anymore. But also conversely, the foreign aspects to the technology, the things that aren't familiar to us, aren't human, are explored, are looked at, and we can also find comfort in sort of recognizing the things where they're different to us, but also where they're similar. It just helps to overall create a more harmonious, more... what's the word? Marriage of different realities and worlds. I think you know what I mean. So yeah, hopefully you found some interesting things in this video, maybe some interesting performances. As I did with my last video, I'm going to be linking everything that I referenced, all the things that I quoted, all of the performances, the links to go and see them, everything I'm going to be putting down below. What do you guys think? What's your perception of robot theater? Is it something that you're worried about? Is it something that interests you? Is there something that you think, you know, you didn't think robot theater could be, and now you're like, oh, that's robot theater? And I hope that you guys like this video. If you did, please give it a like. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't. The notification button, I guess. I feel like that's when you're like a big YouTuber, but maybe one day that'll be something that I'll say that's actually like important. Comment, let me know what you'd want to see videos of, what you enjoyed about these videos or this video or whatever. And yeah. I will see you guys in the next video. All right, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys super soon. Okay.